Well, greetings and good evening. It's Tuesday evening. It's 7:45, and we had a bit of a storm just recently. Did a bit of damage to the roof. Very challenging. Took a gazebo up in the air about 20 foot. Damaged a few things. But I'm sat here in our new seating area. It's like a little patio area. Did have a cover on it and it got blown away, but these things happen. And I know it's 8:45 and the light is fading already. It seems that, yes, the days are getting shorter. Where is summer going? Well, hopefully we got a few more weeks, the children on holiday. And I've been lucky to go and see my daughter down, Sally Ann down in Port Talbot. But more on that another day. I was sort of thinking the other day, I was talking about a fire in a barn that got me here. And I think it sort of reminded me about photography, which is a big part of me. Those who know me is I normally have a piece of baling twine in my pocket, some dreamies, and normally a camera in my hand. I've been filming this project for the last 11 years and beyond. It's 11 years ago, nearly to the day that we signed our contract to run this Cane Hill Countryside Centre, a sort of working farm, well, more of a learning centre and rescue farm. But we got our charity status, and I've recorded it day by day. I don't think not a day goes by without me taking a picture or a video. And I've been doing that a long, long time. And it takes me right back to the 60s when I was young. And I always remember my dad. My dad was quite passionate about photography. He had a box Brownie, which a lot of people would know, quite big negatives in black and white in those days, and used to see the pictures that Dad took. He didn't really have composition or know too much about it, but he liked to capture a moment and some lovely family memories because of it. So I sort of became interested in photography in this 1971, 72. I started a little business selling pets, would you believe? Maybe that's a story for another day. It never really went the way I liked it because I felt that people weren't quite as passionate about animals as I was, and I just assumed everybody loved their animals and they had forever homes. But as we now know, that's not always the case. But I raised a bit of money and bought myself a Canon. Canon, I wish. It was a Chinon. Canon was a big make along with Nikons in the day. But mine was a Chinon. It was a make from a retailer called Dixon's that sold audio and video. I think they sort of moved into Curry's now if you're in this country, but we're not going to go on a shopping trip. But I got myself a camera, and I assume my interest really came from my dad in a box Brownie, and I got the camera and I started taking little slides or transparencies. So these are positive pictures rather than negative. They're in colour, and you put a slide projector up and you can show the pictures. And I took great delight in taking pictures. I think my first picture was in Bourton-on-the-Water of some birds, which we won't mention here at the moment because that's another story. So I took pictures and it had like a light meter in. I didn't really understand it. I wouldn't really want to study books. And so I learnt by my mistakes, took pictures and thought, well, that didn't work out. Why did it need more light? Or I didn't know about exposures and shutter speeds, depth of field. This is all very alien to me. But you learn by your mistakes, and that's what we do in a lot of things in life. And I enjoyed it, and my camera was around with me, and family would tell you that it was a tradition that at Christmas I would do the slideshow of the year. Some of my pictures were really, really good. Some were like, But now they're very important because it's a part of the social history. So I took these pictures and loved it. I just felt that it was part of me. But my dad was not so keen because I remember once he had a four-wheel drive tractor called a County. I was down there working with him. I'd take my camera with me because you never know. And you made every picture count. It's not like today with digital. You sort of take half a dozen pictures and never look at them. You took a picture, you had to get 24 exposures or 36, get them processed, wait a week or so, and then you see the results. Now it's instant. But I think it's thinking about waiting for your pictures to come through the post, or in later times being processed, because I even got my own dark room eventually. So I took a picture of them. My dad was down with the county. I put it on the wheel, and my dad went forward and drove over my camera. I'm not saying it was on purpose. Could have been an accident, but he was a bit frustrated because I would stop and take a picture. To him, that's wasting time. Take a picture, yeah, but not to constantly take pictures. But lucky enough, the ground was soft, and the cameras in those days were made solid, and it pushed into the ground, and a few little dents in it. I got it out, and it worked okay. And that became part of me. And you looked at lenses; they're quite expensive. So I think the first lens I got was a wide angle. Then I got a zoom, a telephoto, and a flash. So bit by bit, I built up my kit, and I learned, from my mistakes. And I think I was always naturally knew about composition. I always say, I later became a teacher, and I said, you got to look at that picture, and if it looks good to you, it's going to be a good picture. And fill the frame. So many people stand so far away from a picture, not really understanding that what they see is what they get, and they stand too far away, or there's a bin in the way in the foreground or in the background. It's all something that, I might do some little tutorials at some point, because it is passionate about myself. And I took these pictures, and, a few years went on. I guess I got better. I made a little bit of money by selling some of my slides to a Northern Picture Library. I think I made enough money one year to go on a little holiday. And when I was on holiday, I was taking pictures, and I made more money to cover the cost. So there was money around in those days, more than probably now, because everybody's taking pictures. I wouldn't say they're all good pictures, but everybody has got a phone and they're snapping away. And the laws of probability that a lot of the pictures are good, because people will keep taking pictures and probably not always knowing how good they were. So I took these pictures. And then one day I was I don't know where I was, but I must have been in Devizes or something with my camera. And someone said, "Oh, Chris, you're like your granddad, Mr. Cave." And I sort of looked round and said, "Oh, was he a photographer?" Because I never knew my granddad on my mum's side. Nobody mentioned him. I assumed he was no longer with us. He was dead. And I never thought about it. Never asked my nan or my mum or my auntie, because nobody talked about granddad. And I later found out why. So there he was. It was like, I got a granddad, and someone said, "He's still alive. He's Mr. Cave down in Longcroft Avenue." And I thought, oh, I've been in that shop. I remember at school going in the shop and going into there to get some sweets for my friends. And there was a lady in there who was, so to say, quite well developed, shall we say. And she used to lean forward and used to see quite a lot of her her boobies. I know, it was so wrong. But I felt that she was sort of doing it on purpose. But anyway, and it became quite, later time, it became quite bad to think that was my step-gran I was looking at, and I thought, oh dear. And she was a lot younger than my granddad. So things started to piece together, and I wanted to know about my granddad, because why did nobody mention him? But why? I was naturally into photography, and obviously I know my dad was, but my granddad was a professional photographer. He produced his own chemicals for developing, and he had the best camera, Hasselblad, and he did lots of weddings and a lot more, which I've not got time to tell you about at this present time. So it was quite like, oh my goodness, was it something that I was naturally drawn to? Maybe I didn't quite understand why, but so that's what I did. I thought, wow. So I spoke to my nan and my mum, and they reluctantly said, well, my nan's didn't want too keen. They said, well, here's your granddad, go and see him. So it was quite a moment to go into Mr. Cave's shop, not seeing Sylve there with her low-cut tops, but I went in there and I thought, okay, and introduced myself, and he was so pleased that a member of the family contacted him. which is a bit crazy because we were only more about 2.5 miles away. So I never knew he was that close to where we were. He's a lot different than I could imagine. He's quite short, balding, glasses. And he had a charm about him, which I will tell you about at some point. And he was really excited. Now, he was, I don't know, was he in his 60s then? It's a job to place, but his wife, sorry, Angus is just go flying past me at the moment, trying to have a piggyback on Widget. No, don't want that. So yeah, it was strange, and so I went up there a few times to see him initially, just to get to know him, and I sort of got to know the story because Mum told me about it. That when my mum, my nan, who was Dolly Nee, became Dorothy Cave. My granddad got married. They had a child called Mary, my auntie, and at a later stage, the talk was that he wanted a son. It was naturally that, I got a daughter, but I want a son who can take over the business or work with me. And he became quite, I'm not saying, what's the word, fixed on that. He was like, okay, I'm going to have a son. So the idea was to call it John, after his dad. My great-grandfather was John Cave. So the name was made, and then when my mum was born, she wasn't a John. She was obviously a lady, a girl, and had a nickname of Johnny, but for whatever reason, I never really found out. I should have asked really, but called Coral, not Carl, Coral, Coral, and that was my mum's name. But my granddad decided that he would go elsewhere, and left my nan with his 2 daughters, and found another lady called Miss Wiltshire, I think it was. And I think she worked in the shop. She became pregnant, and Philip was born, and I think maybe a couple more. But that was not good enough for my granddad. He took on a young girl called Sylv at 15, and at 15, and he was in his 40s. I'm pretty certain of it. I will get a timeline one day and work this out. There was a lot of age difference. And only 15, and she became pregnant to my uncle. Was it uncle? Yes, I get confused. But anyways, step uncle, Philip, and then he had a daughter called Janet. So there's a bit of scandal there, and of course it was illegal. A 15-year-old pregnant but she covered for him, as far as I can recall, trying to piece it up together. She said she went to a party and she didn't know who the father was. Most people did know, and he did get over that scandal. And I think they were very close and passionate, and yes, there was a little strange sort of chemistry there. But we won't go into that at the present time. I think that was for a late night podcast. So I got to know my granddad, and I'd improve my photography. I used to go and help him do weddings. Who would actually volunteer to go and do weddings? But I wanted to learn photography, and he had all the best cameras. And one thing he taught me, which is good to this day, he taught me about light, because apparently that's what you need to take photographs, is light. Who would have known it? So he taught me how to take pictures without any meters. So I don't need a light meter. I know how to set my camera up, and I learnt about depth of field and shutter speed and everything else you need to know. So I was quite honoured to go out with him doing weddings, even though in those days you would take, I think he took about 30 pictures on his Hasselblad to get 24 decent ones. Every picture had to be just so. And one of my jobs was to look for the details, to sort the dresses out and anything that was wrong on the camera. So that was interesting there. All of a sudden being forced to sort out a bride's veil or dress or whatever. But anyway, I did it. And one thing he taught me on the first time, because I get nervous. I think I probably still do, but I think that's probably age now. Until you get nervous, you want to have a wee. And I remember going to this church and I was cut short and I had to sneak around the back of the church to have a wee, which, yes. And there was nowhere else to get. They didn't have toilets in churches in those days. A lot of churches now do have toilets. But my granddad said, right from now on, you do not drink until we've taken the pictures. So if you've got a 2:00 wedding, you're pretty dry by then. But he said, if you're concentrating on your waterworks and not your photography, it won't be good. So I had to learn to wait until the pictures were taken and I can go and have a nice long drink. That was one lesson, learning about how to compose pictures. I think I always had that natural composition, and I think my granddad had a bit of a charm about him, slightly different charm in myself, and he always sort of said to me, because sadly and not unexpectedly, my gran or step-gran left my granddad. He was an old man. She was still young and she found love elsewhere. And I sort of became more of his assistant. And he said, you've got to be careful with women, they will trap you. And I think if I remember right, my granddad did the trapping and he was a smooth talker. And I'm a smooth talker. I'm charming, but I'm respectful and I would never take advantage of a lady just because they were flattered by me. And things are certainly different now than they were then. So I learned a lot from my granddad about people. I sort of probably got more scared of people. And I think just to emphasise that fact, I didn't know what sort of photography I wanted. If I did want to do photography, I was still farming and I was doing a little bit of all sorts. And I did my first wedding. My granddad gave me a wedding down in the Catholic Church in Devizes. He said, I got a spare one, you can do this one, don't worry about it. And I turn up, and this bride and her groom was let out of prison just to get married because she was a good 8 months pregnant. And I remember going to the Catholic Church and the father came up to me and they had a bit of a reception beforehand. They were a bit drunk when they arrived and he just looked at me. I won't try to mimic an Irish voice. To be sure, if you get my pictures of my girl and she looks pregnant, you're going to be in trouble. He threatened me that I had to hide her bump, which was a bit of a challenge. It was a big bump. It was yes. I did it with the flowers and editing and not editing and cropping the picture down with my camera because the pictures were as they were. You didn't go in the dark room and then crop them down or take them into Photoshop because Photoshop was never around. So that's what I did, and it was one of those weddings. My face was red. There was a cat running around the church, and the priest was getting upset. And I thought, oh my God! And they never paid me, but I did the pictures. And it was a grounding. I could tell so many stories about the weddings I went to. A lot of them were amazing. A lot of them were like, okay, why am I doing this? But you learn photography and you learn how to deal with people. And I think one of my skills I taught myself, or natural, was how to communicate and get the best out of people, to make them smile, to just get that little bit of fine detail, a step to the left, step to the right, so they haven't got a fence post coming out of their head or a telegraph pole. Or in some cases, maybe I would do that just for the fun of it, but not on a wedding. That was a privilege to be part of someone's special day, and those memories will last forever. And I was very quick in my photography, I must admit. Probably some people was too quick, but I always had success. I never had a failure, even though you panicked. And eventually I even started developing my own photographs because I thought if I send them away they go missing. Some photographers would take 2 sets of pictures, so they would take someone away to get processed, and if they didn't come back, then you always had another one that you could try. So that was it. But my path for photography, because I'd not moved on to video yet, was a long one. Yeah, a very long journey. And just to finish off, my granddad, he was a bit of a lad in that. I think a lot of his negatives were destroyed because maybe they weren't appropriate. They wouldn't have been that bad in this day and age, but at the time he did a few sort of glamorous shots for ladies, and the ladies would do that for their husbands. Why would you go and pose with a stranger or someone you didn't really know and pose topless for your husband? But that went on. Maybe it was a thing that happened only in Devizes, but I'm sure it went elsewhere. So he said, would you like to come up? I thought, a young lad, a teenager, yes. I'm going to see half-naked woman. And I thought, wow, I'm going to be a glamour photographer. Didn't really think that, but I thought, well, okay, let's see what happens. So I went up there to his shop, and I was in charge of the lighting and setting things up. And the lady had gone round the back and had a dressing gown on. He came out, and she stood there. My granddad said, well, take your dressing gown on. She had some pants on, so I think, yeah, she did. I would have known if she hadn't, I think. Anyway, so he took a dressing gown off, and then, unfortunately, she'd had her bra on, my granddad had told her to take her bra off, before she came to the studio. Could you get the marks? I've not worn a bra, I didn't think, but I have probably seen people who have a bra and you've got these marks. And of course, when you're taking a picture, they're going to show up. You can't Photoshop them out, because I said they're not been invented then. This is back in the 80s or 70s. I'm confused now. Probably in the 70s, wasn't it? Yeah. So there she was, a beautiful lady, bare-chested with marks. So he said, look, put your dressing gown back on, and we're going to have to wait 20 minutes or so. And I had to go make a cup of tea, I think, or coffee, probably a tea in those days. I can't remember. My mind was elsewhere, and I thought, isn't this quite as glamorous as I thought? And then time went on. He gave me this pot of cream makeup. It's called an Anoxa, I think it is. Like a makeup. He said, check the lady over and see if there's some spots, just to cover the spots over, because again, you can't Photoshop them out. And if you've got a lady with a really spot on whatever, she's not going to want it. Her husband won't want to buy it. So there I was there with a bare-chested woman looking for spots. And I thought, is that a spot or was a nipple? I was slightly confused by that stage then. I was bright red, and, she was quite amused by it. And I'm a young lad. How can I phrase this? I can't say putting makeup on. I've just got to be careful what I say now, and it's just all got taken wrong. It was not what I expected, and it was the last time I ever did that. It was nice to know about lighting, and he told me how to get nice curves out of ladies, and he was very good at what he did. But to me, it seemed very impersonal. It's sort of like, okay, I guess in this day and age, if people want it, they get their husbands or boyfriends or girlfriends, whatever, to take the pictures for them. So I dread to think what pictures are being taken now. But it was a sort of glamour photography, and it was the time. So my photography went on, concentrating on weddings. I did christenings, I did sort of events. I think I did the Masons photography. I did passport pictures, all that sort of thing, which has got me interested into composition. And I always try to get better and better. So I have a whole archive of pictures and weddings that I took. But anyway, I better say that's it, because I could go on, because we haven't got to the switch over to video, and how a fire in a barn got me into video. And video, just to finish off, you probably old school, is that video is basically a whole load of series of pictures, one after the other, and when you view them at a certain frame rate, that it looks like movement in video, a movement like. And in this country, we use 25 frames a second, and I think in America it's 30 frames a second. So yeah, so all those pictures you could pause, and so I don't know about PAL and CSC,